So the big fear of raising prices is that your clients will leave or you won't be able to sign up anymore. But let's deal with the leaving clients one because that's the challenge. Let me walk you through a little thought experiment that usually helps with this. Let's say right now you've got 10K revenue. It could be 10K a year, it could be 10K a month, it could be 10K a week, or 10K every few days for some of you guys. But let's say for the sake of easy math, it's 10K revenue that you've got per month. And then I say, hey, you need to double your prices. They're like super duper low. And because it's me and just not some random commenter on the internet, you actually do it. Well, hooray! Now you've got 20K revenue. That's fantastic, right? Except for the bit you fear actually happens. Half of your clients leave in protest over such a dramatic, egregious, excessive price rise. You doubled your prices, they're like, what is this nonsense? Of course I'm going to go shop around and get other quotes. I've worked with you for ages, I feel terribly betrayed, I'm going. And they leave. Because it does happen. When you raise prices, you might lose a client. And now you're back to 10K revenue and you're like, where is that Ben guy? I'm buying a ticket to Australia and I'm going to fly over there and I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. I'm going to find him and bring the torches and pitchforks. Then right before you like string me up, I say, wait, hang on. Yes, your revenue's the same, but you've got half the costs that you used to have because you've got half as many clients. Half of your clients left and you're actually still more profitable than before the price rise. Does that make sense? This is the part where people go, wait, what? No, hang on. That can't be right. Are you sure? So this is really important. And there's a blog post on my website. I'll put it into a more detailed workshop we do about it a bit later. But it really depends on your gross profit margin. You can actually lose quite a lot of clients and still be more profitable. So for those of you who are barely keeping anything after paying for your team costs, you can lose like 90% of your clients to a doubling price rise and still be more profitable. Can you imagine having only 10% of the amount of clients to manage? What kind of a change that would be? And you're actually making more money? Really helped for me. Been really transformative for a lot of people. One of the results I had on my bragging slide right at the beginning was adding 200K a month in revenue within 4 weeks. That was from the price rise. Yes, it was like a $2 million a year agency. So, but still 10% revenue increase. And that actually went straight to the bottom line because there were no extra costs associated with that price rise. So it's really, really transformative, and hopefully this at least puts a dent in the fear about raising prices. So when I talk about it later, maybe you'll be a bit open to it if it's something that you need to do. Also, there are things you can do to make sure fewer clients leave. Like the way you announce a price rise, the way you test the waters, the way you pick the clients that are going to do the price rise, all that kind of stuff can actually lower this 50% number of the clients who left. You imagine if you doubled your prices, you got to the 20K revenue and only a quarter of your clients left. So you'd be at 15K revenue and half the costs you used to have. That's how you can make a really big difference with the price rise when it's executed well. More on that in another session. So this is for existing clients. For new clients, if your prices are a bit too low, the simple thing is raise your prices 5% for each successful client sign up. Like, okay, your client signed up, all right, the next guy, the price is 5% higher or 10% higher. Until every single sales lead objects to your prices, you can probably raise them a bit more. Is this making sense? Following. Anybody interested in like a how to raise prices workshop later? All right, so gross profit margin is something I spent a lot of time talking about. The rest of the workshop is going to go a lot faster as we're going to touch on things a bit more briefly. Remember, those of you in the community have access to the recording. We might even put the slides up or something. I'm not sure. So we talked about revenue, we talked about gross profit margin. We've got 3 more key numbers to go through. And the third one is client acquisition as a percentage of your revenue. Like how much of your revenue are you spending on growth? We just talked about how much of your revenue are you spending on delivering the work or how much you get to keep after that. Now we're talking about how much you're spending on clients. And I got the 3 bears and some porridge there. So a lot of you would know the story of Goldilocks. She illegally broke into the 3 bears' house, stole some porridge, made a nuisance of herself and slept in their bed. But the part of the story I want to focus on is the porridge. Goldilocks was testing the porridge. She wanted porridge that Elena says, yes, slides and recording will be uploaded on school shortly after the session. Thank you, Elena. So Goldilocks wanted porridge at the right temperature. Not too cold, not too hot, just right. And that's kind of what we want for your pipeline as well. If your pipeline's too cold, there's not enough leads, you can't hit your revenue goals. If your pipeline's too hot, it means you spent more money and time than necessary warming up your leads. Like you warmed them up way too hot. I mean, yes, it'd be nice if people signed up without a sales call, but it's more efficient use of your money to warm them up just enough so that you can convert them on a sales call. So I have a Goldilocks zone for how much money to be spending on client acquisition as a percentage of your revenue, so that it's not too cold, you are actually getting some leads, and it's not too hot, like you're being inefficient with your marketing spend. And the Goldilocks zone is 5 to 15% of your revenue. Spending 5 to 15% of your revenue means that you'll have leads, they won't be impossible to convert on sales calls, and you should be able to grow your agency at a reasonable rate with that kind of a budget. Your time counts. Just think about how much it would cost to pay someone else to do what you're doing. So for those of you who are like, oh, I'm not spending anything right now because you're doing it all yourself, think about how much you would have to pay someone else to do it, and you might find that you're actually spending too much. Like, maybe you could be a bit more efficient. We got some resources and you can ask some questions in the Slack group about that. Advanced users can operate outside the 5 to 15% Goldilocks zone, but generally what I find with most agencies, but businesses broadly, is that they're underspending. It's like they're not spending enough on client acquisition and they're wondering why their lead pipeline is cold. You're not spending enough on Facebook ads or your own SEO, well, maybe not as an SEO agency, but you're not spending enough building authority, partnerships, JVs, sponsorships, going to events, like all the different marketing channels, content even. It's like you're not really spending much money and wondering why you don't actually have many leads. You could also use this 5 to 15% of revenue Goldilocks zone. You could use it for your clients. So you can suggest a marketing budget for them and compare what they're actually spending to like an ideal of 15% of their revenue, and then your fees are then an affordable portion of the budget they should be spending. Or if your clients are in a competitive niche, not very profitable niche for them, that you could maybe suggest 5% of revenue as a budget that they should be spending on marketing when you have having those strategy level discussions on the sales call. So question for you guys, is your pipeline too cold, too hot, or just right? Note in the chat for me. Sometimes when I ask this question, someone will say, it's always too cold. It can always be warmer. I always want more leads. Yep, a few people saying cold. Yeah, absolutely. And just to quickly, oh my God. Oh dear. Hopefully we can help you with that in the Slack group. So what I talked about with gross profit margin and how Tommy was working really hard, but he was fighting fires because he didn't have enough money to pay managers to do that for them so they could focus on client acquisition. Part of the reason why your pipeline could be cold is because you are way too busy doing the client work, because your pricing doesn't allow you to be able to afford to pay people to do the work for you. And so because your pricing, that's why your pipeline is cold. It's not because you're not, you don't have the right thing on your website. It could be like you just don't have enough time to be able to spend on client acquisition because you're so busy with the client work, because your pricing needs to change. So it's one of those hidden things, and it's the reason why I talk about gross profit margin so much, is because if you have a cold pipeline, what are you going to do? Start a cold email campaign, maybe. And then maybe you'll get some sales calls, but they won't be particularly warm because you don't have time to set up, an email nurture sequence between the point where they book a call and where they show up for the call. And so then they're not very warm when they get on the call. Your conversion rate is really, really low, not because of a lack of skill on your part, but just because you haven't had enough time, you haven't had enough money, because your gross profit margin sucks. So that's number 3. The fourth of the 5 key numbers is owner pay. And the reason why this is a key number is because you need to balance things. The business needs cash, like a body needs oxygen to breathe. If you can't pay your bills, then your business is immediately dead. It's very, very important. We can survive, I don't know how many weeks without food, but oxygen is one of those things that is really, really important. But you need to balance that with your personal expenses, because you do have personal expenses no matter how frugal you are. And if you're not earning enough from your business, you'll get distracted from the business by another opportunity or a job. You'll need to go get a job, or like some other shiny object will be like, oh, maybe it'll be less stressful and I can earn more money there. So owner pay is a bit of a balance. For most agencies, it's anywhere between 10 and 40% of revenue, depending on how profitable the business is and how good you are with your gross profit margin and client acquisition costs. The main takeaway here is don't pull out all the profit or cash out of the business. Let some money build up in the business bank account. And then that way you come to a slow period or an unexpected bill comes up or an opportunity to sponsor a conference for your niche at a reduced rate because it's last minute. Like imagine that comes up and instead of like having to pay $10,000 to sponsor the niche conference, they offer it to you for $1,000 because a sponsor pulled out last minute or they realized they could sell another slot, but it's so short term that they can't charge the normal amount. And then that comes up and lucky you have some money saved up. You can take advantage of that opportunity. And then the fifth and final key number is profit. What's left of your revenue after taking away all the expenses. 10 to 20% of revenue is normal for a lot of agencies. You can get to 40% profit or higher if you get the gross profit margin and a bunch of other things right. So imagine you got $1 million agency, 10% profit is $100,000 a year, 40% profit is $400,000 a year. That's a fairly decent amount of profit. It's worth putting in the effort to get that higher profit percentage. But looking at your profit percentage is a lower priority than the other numbers I've talked about. Look after the gross profit margin and your revenue growth first. They're the things that you should do first as a priority, and then the profits will kind of pile up so long as you don't spend it all. Revenue growth and good gross profit margin together would lead to a lot of profits. After looking at the other four, software, travel, bank fees, accounting fees, etc., the expenses that aren't doing client work, aren't client communication, aren't client acquisition or your own to pay, we can do another session on getting lean and staying lean with all these other expenses, but I'll leave that for another time. It's something I actually did in Blueprint when I first joined. I'll share that with you on another session. So that's the 5 key numbers: revenue, gross profit margin, client acquisition, owner pay, and profit. Which of these do you think you need to work on? Give me a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the chat. You're allowed to pick 2 of them, but no more than 2. There's got to be a priority. Gross profit margin, revenue, client acquisition costs. Yep. A few people saying 1 and 3. One person I've converted to gross profit margin. That's good. That's good. We will do another session on pricing just to make sure. Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys. Now, I'm going to move through the rest of it fairly fast so I can leave some time for Q&A at the end. But like I said, you can pop questions as we go as well. So the big invisible cost that doesn't show up on your financials, and I just kind of like spoiled it there for you. It's the efficient and effective use of your time. Your time, the team's time, but mostly your time. Let's talk about Sean. I like Sean. He's one of my favorites. So when I first started working with Sean, he runs a marketing agency, good bit of SEO, but also some PPC. When I first started working with him, he was doing $44K a month in revenue. He was stuck in operations, fighting fires, doing client work, making sure everything was happening. He had no time for sales, and so he wasn't growing. No time for getting more clients. And so what I taught him, this is a message that you can take a guideline for all of you, is to spend 50 to 75% of his time on sales and client acquisition. If a smart person like Sean or like some of you guys, I'm sure you would all consider yourself smart, yeah? Spending 50 to 70% of your time trying to get more clients, I'm sure you'd figure it out, especially with the resources we have available. Sean needed to delegate a few things and be comfortable with it in order to spend that time. And then as a result, he went from 44K a month to 83K a month in 7 months. I did not need to teach him anything about sales. I did later and, things are going well. But because he had that extra revenue coming in, he was also able to hire an ops manager, rockstar operations manager, who can implement all the operations improvements that used to distract Sean. He can manage all the things that used to distract Sean so he can continue to spend that much time. Now, how this applies to you, lesson is prioritize your time. I'm not saying stop focusing on operations. I don't know your scenario, but the main thing is what we spend our time on matters. Make sure you're spending time on the actual priorities. For example, if you spent 20 hours per week on getting clients, using the resources here at Blueprint, asking questions in the Slack community, the chances of you growing your revenue pretty high. Right? 20 hours a week, I'm sure you could figure that out. So for Sean, the key was removing things that he was spending time on to make time for getting clients. And there's 2 tools that I recommend for removing time-consuming things and improving your efficiency. So Sean choosing to work on the priority task, that's effective use of your time. And then there's efficiency, which is like doing the chosen tasks quickly and well. So there's 2 frameworks here. One, the task audit framework. For every single task that you do or one of your team members does, you ask these questions. Can it be eliminated? Is this task necessary at all? So like doing a 4th post in a day on your agency's social media. Is that actually necessary? Is it going to move the needle? If not, stop doing it. If a task can't be eliminated, can it be automated? because automation is usually faster, cheaper, and more accurate than people. The third is, okay, well, if it can't be eliminated or automated, delegate it to someone who's cheaper than what you could be doing with your time. And then finally, if it is something that you have to do that can't be delegated, give yourself a short deadline so that you just focus and get the priority of it done. Another framework, and we can do a working session on any of these. Just let us know in the Slack group, is going through and doing a time audit. So you list out all of your tasks, and then for each of them, you make a decision on each of them. This is the task audit framework, I should say, I got from Tim Ferriss. The time audit, there's a few different decisions you can make. You could, for each of those tasks that you're spending time on or that your team's spending time on, you could cut it, like eliminating for. You could reduce the amount of time it takes you. You could swap it with something else. That, like, for example, if you're doing 4 social media posts per day on your agency website, you could do cold emails instead, which might take less time. You could pause or put off something. You could automate it. You could delegate it. You could maybe spend more time if the thing is really worth it for you and is making a difference for your agency. Maybe you want to spend more time on it. And then maybe you could just leave as is. Just keep doing it. And then maybe you're unsure and talk to us about it. And then finally, you just make the changes. I could do a video walking you through each of these so that you could do it along with me, or I could do a live session. Thoughts? Let me know in the chat. Video, live, or you're good to just do it on your own now that I've shown you this. Finally, let's go through the don't go broke rules of thumb. And a bit tongue-in-cheek here, like high gross profit margin and then don't spend all your money. That's one of the things I've already covered. So the main thing I want to talk about here is just a savings buffer. Really simple, just one slide here for you, and then we can get on with the Q&A. Basically, you pick a target. Either you're aiming for 3 to 6 months of expenses in a savings buffer or 1 month of revenue in a savings buffer. You start putting aside 1% of the cash you receive each week from clients. You gradually increase that 1% up to 10%, and then you avoid spending the money in your savings account. You will need it occasionally, and that's what it's for, but avoiding spending it is obviously how you keep a savings buffer. Now, how to choose between option A and option B, that's just personal taste, really. The 1 month of revenue is easy to work out. If you don't have bookkeeping, for example, if you've got bookkeeping reports, you could do 3 to 6 months of expenses as your target. The reason why I say 3 to 6 months of expenses or 1 month of revenue, the logic behind it is, what if half of your clients disappear all of a sudden? Like, ChatGPT version 10 comes out and then it can be a marketing agency or something like that. Or it can do some of the things that you do. Or there's a Google penalty and suddenly SEO isn't really something that you can offer your clients in the same way. And your clients are like, oh, Google told me I don't need an SEO agency anymore. Bye, guys. Or like, I want to cut the SEO part of my fee with you. Having this buffer of 1 month of revenue means that like you can survive for 2 months on, half of your clients having left. You can survive for 2 months without having to cut any expenses while you figure out how to replace that revenue. Or like if you got the 3 to 6 months of expenses, you can keep paying that team that you spend so much time building. You can keep paying them while you figure something out. So that's why savings buffer is helpful. And I say put aside 1% of cash. We want to start easy and small. Some people in my family have a New Year's resolution to get in shape, get fit. They sign up for a gym membership. They go 5 times to the gym in the first week, and then they are terribly sick the second week, and then they just don't go back to the gym, and they cancel their membership 2 months later because they just tried to go too fast, too hard, too fast. It wasn't actually effective. But for you, question in the chat, like, how would a savings buffer impact you? Like, would you be more calm, or would you be less stressed about big clients leaving? Would you be less desperate on sales calls? Would you be able to take some time off or be ready for a last minute opportunity? How would a savings buffer make a difference for you? And those of you who do have a savings buffer, like, what's the benefit? Just to share it for the other people. Help me sell them on the end. I'll move on and I'll let the chat things come in. Okay, so here's what we've talked about today. Here's what I've taught you. Each of these things I could go into a lot deeper, but hopefully this gives you a few easy, quick changes or important priority changes you can make in your agency and generate some more profits. Talked about the 5 key numbers, the invisible cost, use of time, and how not to go broke. Savings buffer. So before we go to the Q&A, in the chat, what was the most impactful thing for you today? Any big aha moments or new things you learned that could be helpful? Or what else would you like me to do sessions on? around the numbers, around anything we talked about here. I have plenty of ideas, but your input will shape what we do first. Golden rule and the ultimate gross profit margin percentage. Yes, very important thing to aim for. Helps you stop burning out. Not burn out. Also, we might move on to the Q&A section, and might actually stop the live stream because some of you guys might want to share some numbers, and just for your privacy we'll stop it, and also to like tease and encourage the people in the Facebook group to come join the party on the inside. This is only part of what we do. This community is pretty active, and we've got a lot more sessions planned. So thank you guys watching the live stream. We'll see you next time. Alright, live stream is done. If you have a question, pop a Q in the chat and then we'll unmute you and you can just ask me live. I've got about 5 minutes here, and you can also ask me questions in the Slack channels. Anybody have a question? Or just unmute and say, oh yeah, I've got one. I see thoughtful faces. Alright, I think there's enough chance for you to pop a Q in the chat or figure out the unmute button. So we might wrap it up there. Give you another 15-20 seconds to pop a Q in the chat before we wrap it up. And I'll go have a snack before my next call. Thank you guys for participating in the chat. I appreciate it. It's good. It helps me make sure that you're following along. If you want to ask any questions about this, just tag me in a message in the community channel. We don't really have a numbers channel. Put your question in there. You're welcome, Nassar. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Those of you in the inner circle, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, Omar. Thank you for watching. The recording will be up shortly. I'll send the recording link over to Elaine. It should be up in the next few hours. Thank you, everybody, for watching.